All right, what is going on, guys? And welcome to another video. I am so pumped to talk to you about today's topic, which is you don't need any more motivation. What you really need is a pattern interrupt. If you're the kind of person that, like me in the past, has gotten ultra motivated on his Sundays, planned everything out for the week, my world domination, and by Wednesday, you're completely burnt out, you're back to your old habits, back to your old identity that's getting you your current results, then this video is directed at you. And this is coming from somebody who absolutely loved the idea of motivation. You know, I was a competitive athlete all throughout college, playing basketball. Before a game, I'd pop on some Eric Thomas, absolute legend. All that stuff is valuable, but at the end of the day, neurologically, your brain doesn't run on motivation. It runs on patterns. That's why a lot of the motivation that you've watched in the past hasn't worked. It might for a little bit, but then you go right back to your old habits and the old patterns that you run on. Neurologically, you don't need any more motivation. What you need to do is become more aware. You need to raise your level of understanding. And the more you can understand yourself, the more you can understand how your mind runs on these patterns, the better you can control yourself, your behaviors, the way you feel, your actions, which is then going to have an effect on your reality and the results that you get. Your brain is essentially a pattern recognition machine that tries to automate as much of your behavior as possible. The more it can store your behaviors, your habits down in your cerebellum, where you don't really have to think about it, like pretty much how you feel when you're driving a car, you don't really have to think about it. You can get lost in thought because it's kind of automatic. That helps your body conserve energy. So your brain wants to do that. Brain is not wired to help you grow. It's wired to help you stay alive. This is how our brains have evolved since times when there was a lot more danger around us, like wild animals, like saber-toothed tigers. This isn't, inherently a bad thing, of course. It's allowed our species to evolve, but these days it can be detrimental because your brain, it does a very poor job at keeping you alive. Growth to your brain equals a risk, and a risk equals uncertainty. And uncertainty equals danger. So your brain resists any type of uncertainty, any type of unfamiliarity. And this is heavily problematic if you're not aware and you don't understand what's going on here, because we all can kind of get behind the idea that in order to grow, we need to get outside of our comfort zone, right? But, the problem is that anytime you do something outside of your comfort zone or unfamiliar, you're going to feel this conflicting feeling inside you, this thing that's trying to keep you alive, that fight or flight response. So anytime you try to chase a new goal, get into that sales job, even though you've never done sales before, move out of your hometown, right? Start posting on social media, get up on stage and speak your message to a crowd. Anytime you do these things that are unfamiliar, it's literally fight or flight inside you. And so the problem is most people don't understand why they're feeling this conflicting feeling inside them, that this is completely normal. This is just your brain trying to keep you alive, doing a very poor job of it. If you don't understand this, you're just going to feel that stress. You're going to feel that fight or flight and go, hold on a sec, maybe I shouldn't do any of this. And if you don't pursue any of these things outside of your comfort zone, then you're never going to grow. And so this is the vicious cycle that, people constantly go through. They get an idea to try that new thing that they're forming an interest of, right? Try out that new hobby. Let's say it's starting to post social media. I know this is the experience that I had, like most creators do. Right when you do that, a part of your brain known as your amygdala lights up, and it sends a stress response to the body in the form of cortisol. Cortisol flows through the body, so your stress goes up, right? Our natural response, if you don't understand what's going on here, is to back away. And when you back away from the threat, your cortisol starts to go down. You start to feel relief. And because you feel relief, you're at peace again. And so it reinforces your decision to back away from those things. And you think, okay, I'm just going to stay here in my comfort zone. And that's the reason why most people stay stuck, sometimes for years and years. And this whole idea is beautifully displayed in an incredible movie that I think should be mandatory for everybody to watch. If you haven't, please go watch this movie tonight. But I'm talking about The Matrix. Not only is it an absolutely badass movie, just an entertaining movie to watch, the metaphor in it is so incredibly eye-opening for anybody that looks kind of beyond the slow motion fighting and dodging bullets in it. The metaphor of the Matrix is that most people live in a cage of their own making, a mental prison, if you will, because once again, their mind wants to keep them alive by keeping them in their comfort zone. And deep down intrinsically, we all want to grow. It's just part of our spiritual nature, our DNA, that we want to grow, we want to expand, we want to make our lives bigger and beautiful. But a lot of us are living in fear. Every time we think about maybe pursuing that new thing that we want to expand who we are and, chase new things and grow, we back away from those things because we feel this inner turmoil of our mind trying to keep us in our comfort zone. And so the movie is, awesome. Neo kind of feels deep down that, something's wrong with his life, that it should be different. Is this really all I have for me for the rest of my life, right? He's working this job that he hates. He feels deep down that something just isn't right. And of course he ends up, spoiler alert, ends up being in a simulation in a world that was generated for him, and he's able to break free from it. And the metaphor that takes place with Neo is that he eventually becomes more aware. He raises his level of consciousness and understands what's going on, where he's able to break free from the Matrix and eventually develops this unlimited belief that he can do anything, right? And starts doing all kinds of crazy stuff and has all these powers. But, that's something we all need to do and that we all can work towards, is breaking free from our own matrix, our own simulation, our limiting beliefs that we've put on ourselves, which I've talked about in the past, due to our self-image, our perception that we've formed on the world and ourselves, where, Earl Nightingale says it's crazy how we see other people and we assume that they can do more than us. And we look at ourselves, and for the same equally strange reason, we think that we're not as capable as these other people that are doing cool things with their life. And obviously that's all BS. Those are just veils that you've, put over your eyes. That's the mental prison that you've created based on, your perceptions, these automatic behaviors that have become, autopilot for you. And the beautiful thing with all this stuff is, just like Neo, you can break free from this. You can break free from the Matrix by breaking up the patterns, in your life. First and easiest way to do this is through a physical pattern interrupt. And the first thing you need to understand is that the mind and body are connected. They affect one another. That's why, for example, they say your gut is like your second brain. It literally affects the way your brain operates. So the mind and body are one. So by shocking the system in the body, you're going to be able to do that cognitively as well. And of course, it's uncomfortable whenever you start doing any of these things, because once again, like we talked about, now you understand why your amygdala fires up. Your mind wants to keep you alive, and because it's unfamiliar, it's going to shoot cortisol into your system. You're going to feel anxious. You're going to feel like you don't want to do it when you start to commit to these physical, uncomfortable things, but you need to if you want to shock the system. And now that you understand why you feel the way you do, then you can expect it. You can expect it when you start to do these daily hard things and be able to navigate these feelings a lot better. All right, some very low entry physical interrupts that you can implement into your day immediately. Number one, walking daily, getting your steps in every day. In the morning, I love starting off my day, getting outside, getting some sunlight, getting some steps in, getting some fresh air, being out in nature. All of this stuff is proven to be amazing for your body and amazing for your mind. It's one of the most underrated habits out there. You don't need to go for sprints in the morning or go for a jog, especially if you're not doing anything right now. Just go get some steps in every single morning. Super easy, great way to shock the system. Second one is one that takes a little more practice, but cold showers. This has also been proven to be amazing for you. Shock the system, get you used to doing hard things, right? And it also wakes you up. I do this after my morning walk when I get back and I get a little bit of workout in, a little bit of a warm shower, and then for the last 30 seconds to a minute, turn it cold. And it actually is invigorating, and it kind of wakes me up and gets me sharp before I start tackling some work. And so that's the second way. Another physical interrupt that I almost want to plead with you to add to your day is breathing exercises. This is a phenomenal and low entry way to reset your entire nervous system and give you a calm focus, lower stress, literally there's so much science behind it that of how beneficial it is for you. So add it to your day. This is probably the easiest out of the 3 that I've mentioned so far. In specific, I want you to look up box breathing because there's some more complicated breathing exercises. This one is the easiest and it's still incredibly beneficial for you. I do it every single day. Look up box breathing on YouTube. And then after you start to get comfortable with these lower entry little physical interrupts, then you can start to work your way up to the higher commitment tasks like going to the gym every day, right? If that's too big for you right now, start with some resistance bands on Amazon. And when you get your walk in for the day, go do some easy resistance band workouts, right? So the goal is to start with low entry physical interrupts, work your way up to the bigger commitment ones. Second one, pattern interrupt that you can start to implement immediately is a verbal interrupt. For the love of God, please become more conscious of the way that you are speaking about yourself and about your life, especially to other people. It's really easy to just look around and observe how most people talk and see how most people are addicted to talking about their problems, the bad things in their life, the bad things they saw in the news, the bad things that people have done to them, talking shit on other people, right? They're addicted to it. And this isn't some positive woo-woo stuff. Literally, neuroscience tells us that the way you speak, on a habitual basis creates neural circuits in your mind. It creates these neural pathways. And when you talk about something negative, you're almost reliving that problem, and cortisol goes through your system. That's why people who talk about their problems, they're always stressed, right? And because they're stressed, they typically create more problems in their life, right? And anytime you talk about something that you're grateful for, typically dopamine and serotonin enter into your body. So neurologically, everything that you're saying is always programming you. And so you're either programming you for abundance and, to, be in alignment with the person that you want to become, or you're programming yourself into scarcity, limiting beliefs, problems, stressed out, bad things happening to you, and creating more of that in your life. It's crazy when you really start to observe how most people, talk. And the thing is they're not even conscious of this. Once again, cerebellum, automatic behavior. It's on autopilot. It's like when they're driving, they don't have to even think about it. They don't even realize that most of the time they open up their mouth, it's about bad things in their life. And all they're doing is rewiring these neural circuits in their mind, neurons that fire together, wire together. So they're just creating all these negative neural pathways in their mind, creating negative thought patterns, negative behaviors, and it's just leading to more problems in their life. And anytime you open up your mouth to talk about your problems, obviously there's a time and a place if you're venting to somebody or you're in therapy or whatever, right? But the point is to not get in this, habitual addiction to talk about your problems. Because, first of all, nobody really cares. Everyone has their own problems, right? And so most people don't actually care, even if they're acting like it. 2, obviously, talking about your problems isn't going to solve them, and it's overall just not going to serve you. So you might as well find something, to talk about that you're grateful for, or something more positive. The third pattern interrupt is media interrupts. Once again, people are completely unaware that every time they turn on their music, they're listening to, music that talks about negative things, drugs, violence, all that stuff. And it's programming you. Once again, it's programming you. Your mind literally absorbs everything, whether you realize it or not. Don't get me wrong. I love some Future, right? But most of the time I'm listening to stuff that's uplifting, stuff that makes me feel alive, not stuff that gets me depressed or puts me in this negative mood where it just talks about all these negative, toxic things. And of course, this isn't just music. This is the shows that you watch. This is the content that you scroll on. Just do a complete media detox. And this is one of the easiest and most beneficial ways to shock the system, break you out of your current comfort zone, your current matrix. If you start every morning with watching fear-based news and listening to music talking about drugs and violence, then don't be surprised when you feel like crap and are low energy. The problem with all this stuff is, I get it. I mean, negative media is entertaining, watching the news with all this crazy stuff going on. It can be exciting and entertaining, but you just have to ask yourself, is this serving me? Is this making my life better? And of course, none of it is. And you can't be perfect with this stuff, right? I'm not saying to never watch a rated R movie where there's no bad things that happen, but overall, just your dominant view of consuming media, and whether that's music, watching stuff, whatever it is, make sure it's overall things that are, not toxic to you and not tainting your mind. Just unfollow all the bullshit meme pages with negative media on there, or just violence and people debating over stuff that just doesn't matter, and just negative stuff. Unfollow all those accounts. Number 2, stop watching the news, please. Maybe sometimes, but for the most part, it's just fear-based propaganda. It's not serving you. Number 3, the shows you watch, make sure they're not negative. Definitely make sure you're not watching any no-no videos. You know what I'm talking about. It's all just horrible for your mind. And lastly, the music you listen to, because this is probably one of the, biggest forms of media that we constantly, are absorbing. Man, please listen to some good music. Make a playlist on your phone. I like to title it Highest Self, where it's just, first of all, good music. A lot of the music that makes us feel alive and isn't toxic to us is actually like good music. But also, it just doesn't, it's not toxic programming. So I want to give you a few songs off my playlist that are not only just bangers, but also just great songs for the mind, for the brain, for just making you feel alive. And they're not going to be toxic to your mind and your soul. Number 1, Where the Streets Have No Name by U2, legendary band. Number 2, Every Teardrop is a Waterfall, Coldplay. Yes, I said it. Number 3, Carry Me Away by one of the GOATs, John Mayer. Number 4, this band has multiple bangers, but Concert Pitch by Empire of the Sun. Number 5, Real Love Baby, Father John Misty. Number 6, for my electronic people, Sunday Song by Lane 8. And then, last but not least, Rodman by the boy Mike. So to finish off this video, I want to get back to our, original statement that you don't need more motivation. You don't need motivation. Motivation at the end of the day is not going to change who you are. What you need to do is you need to implement a pattern interrupt, right? You need to shock the system. And what we're really talking about here that you really need is knowledge and understanding. You need awareness. Now that you're aware of the stuff that we talked about here, the neuroscience behind this, you are starting to understand these things, you're raising your level of knowledge. And the problem with a lot of this stuff is if you don't, understand it, you are living in ignorance. Ignorance is the problem behind, most of the problems in the world. Imagine if most people understood what we're talking about here, which is why I'm so passionate about sharing this information, because I was completely ignorant to all this stuff. I had so many limiting beliefs, and I'm still working on myself, but I've come a long way when I started to understand why, I have some of these beliefs about myself, and how to dissect these limiting beliefs, how to learn more about my self-image, how to learn more about the neurochemicals, that go through my body, cortisol, endorphins, serotonin, dopamine, and how they affect the way I feel, my self-image, right? The amygdala, your prefrontal cortex, the cerebellum, all this stuff that is just so incredibly valuable information to help you control yourself and control your life. Imagine if everybody knew this stuff, the average person. How much would that help people? How much would that make people, give people the ability to live more happy and fulfilled lives, and, not be stuck their entire lives in situations that they hate, right? It would cure so many problems. And, what's keeping people stuck is ignorance. And I want to make it really clear. A lot of people hear ignorance and they compare it to stupidity. I'm not saying that at all. Ignorance does not mean stupidity. Ignorance is simply not knowing, is being unaware. For example, people that are ignorant to this information, every time they try to grow, every time they try to expand who they are, which is a natural instinct of ours, every time they try to do it, right? This process takes place in their mind. They feel the fight or flight response and they go, whoa, 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 maybe I just shouldn't. And they live in fear their entire life, right? And obviously, if you're living in fear, you're never going to grow, right? And so they die with a lot of regret, and they die with a lot of their dreams inside them because, fear just kept them where they're at. And one of my favorite quotes of all time, if not my absolute favorite, is Faith based on understanding is the key to freedom. Now, what is faith? Faith is simply the opposite of fear. Faith and fear are similar in the way that they both require you to believe in something invisible, something that you can't see, right? With fear, you're imagining a negative future. With faith, you're choosing to imagine a positive future or a positive outcome. But, most people live in fear their entire lives. Fear of other people's opinions, fear of poverty, fear of, not being loved, fear of humiliation, fear of all kinds of things. I think we can all get behind the idea that you need to implement faith into your life in order to eliminate fear. And every great company, every great sports team, they had a lot of faith in their ability to do something exceptional before they did it. But then, the golden question becomes, how do we incorporate faith into our lives? How do we live with faith in a world that literally breeds fear? I mean, just look around, turn on the TV like we talked about, turn on the news. I mean, there's just fear-based programming all around on content you scroll, bad things happening, and it's programming us to live in fear. Well, I admit that, having faith, just for the sake of it is incredibly difficult in a world that's, breeding and spreading fear constantly. But remember the quote, faith based on understanding is the key to freedom. Faith based on understanding. Raising your level of understanding is the key to having the foundation of faith. You can have more faith in your life when you start to understand some of these things that we're talking about. Raising your level of understanding of yourself, of your mind, of how you operate, of the world, right? It allows you to have a lot more faith in your life and faith in yourself because you start to develop knowledge of how to take control of kind of the cockpit of your life, right? Even if your plane is going down and things aren't going well, understanding and knowledge allows you to take hold of the wheel. The key to shifting from living in fear to living in faith is built upon the foundation of understanding. Raising your understanding of, yourself, of the world, of how to take control of this inner operating system, how to shatter this matrix that you've built for yourself, break out of limiting beliefs. So my advice is to not live in ignorance, live in knowledge, faith, understanding. And that is a choice. You can choose to walk the path of ignorance and just say, oh, this stuff is BS. Why would I learn anything about my, neurochemical biology and how I operate in my mind? Why would I even spend time learning about this stuff? That's choosing the path of ignorance. Or you can put in the time, the work to understanding yourself and living the path of knowledge and more faith and just a better life, right? And you don't need more motivation. What you need is a pattern interrupt to break this matrix that you're in, to shock the system. And if you got value out of this video, please just take a second to hit that like button. It helps my content reach more people. Consider subscribing if you want to see these videos weekly that I put out on sales, the psychology behind human behavior, neuroscience-backed self-development, personal branding. I'm going to put out some fire stuff on online marketing, and it's all free game. Everything I've learned on my journey so far. So other than that, appreciate you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.